Hello, it's Mr. Wyman from room 207 at Will Lane Elementary in Macungie, Pennsylvania, United States of America. And tomorrow is the last day of March in 2021, and I am super pleased to bring to you for the last installment of our Women's History Month, Building Zaha by Victoria Tentler Krylov. With magnificence and splendor, debut author-illustrator Victoria Tentler Krylov paints the story of the indomitable Zaha Hadid. And here are a few of her structures that she designed. I highly recommend that you Google her and watch YouTube videos showing like the top 10 and top 5 buildings and structures that Zaha designed. Her firm is still going strong, and there's, I think, 400 people who work in her company. She, unfortunately, in 2016 passed away. I believe it was a heart attack. That's not mentioned in this book, I don't believe. And it's amazing what they've done and what she inspired her life. So, you really have to have a goal. The goalposts might shift, but you should have a goal. Zaha Hadid was a thinker and an observer and never remained still. As a young girl, she loved to explore the mosques and palaces around Baghdad, where sunlight streamed through windows, forming shadows that shifted and rippled like water. Zaha loved to stay up late, reading, and in one book she read about how people built floating homes in the Sumerian wetlands. She was determined to see this for herself. Zaha traveled with her father to Sumer, where watery marshes, reeds, and grasses rippled and flowed all around. It was beautiful, complete harmony, and it never remained still. Zaha wondered whether it was better to live in a modern city like Baghdad or like this, as one with nature. Take a look at these homes, like built on the grasslands, and there isn't a lot of detail. This might be another thing that you could search in Google or YouTube to check out. One time, Zaha's aunt and uncle came over, excited to share a scale model, this right here, of their future house. Zaha wasn't allowed to touch the model, but she couldn't pull herself away. It was a bit like a dollhouse, but it was much more than a toy. Thoughts of creating, shaping, and constructing danced in Zaha's head. Zaha set a goal for herself and got to work right away. Her family could tell she had big plans. You could become Iraq's first female astronaut, one of her brothers suggested, but Zaha had something else in mind. I want to be an architect, she announced. She was interested in exploring a different kind of space. So there's a little play on words there. The homograph space could mean outer space, and it could mean right here, what takes up space. Construction sites fascinated Zaha. She couldn't pass one without stopping to imagine the shapes and structures that might emerge. When she didn't have her notebook to sketch in, she worked out calculations in her head. Zaha loved math. She didn't see much difference between solving problems and designing buildings. Both were creative and challenging, just what she liked. Zaha got her math degree in Beirut, then packed up and moved to London. It was time to get serious about studying architecture. It rained and rained in England, but this didn't bother Zaha. She didn't have time to bask in the sun anyway. She stayed in the studio for hours on end, sketching, reading, and thinking. Here she is right here, working out plans with some coffee or tea. Zaha was not afraid to question what was possible. Even her process was different. The way she drew a staircase, you would smash your head against the ceiling, said one of her professors. But Zaha knew she could always fix the details, and she was right. Zaha dreamed big and defied convention. What is convention? Convention would be like tradition, maybe. She defied what people said had to be, and she wanted to try new things. Wait till you see some of the pictures of the buildings she designed. They are very unique and different, and here's a word for you: unconventional. She reached for paints and brushes and conjured structures that tilted, swayed, and flowed on the air. Zaha impressed her professors, and 2 of them hired her to work at their firm after graduation. Firm would be like a business, so they actually hired her to work for them. Zaha brought new ideas to the office in more ways than one. She liked to challenge the rules, standing her ground in fabulous furry heels. There's an assumption that if you dress like a man, then people will respond to you more, she stated. You shouldn't have to look drab to appear professional. Look how fancy she looks in her fashionable attire. And this bracelet and ring. I've seen interviews with her, and she had across 3 fingers this long, like golden ring. It's really interesting looking. After 3 years, Zaha opened her own studio where she worked harder than ever. I think about architecture all the time. I dream it sometimes, she said. Zaha was becoming famous in England. People talked about her unconventional ideas. There's the word unconventional. And her paintings, and yet she wasn't hired to design. So everybody was inspired and liked what she was doing and presenting, but she couldn't get she couldn't get anybody to agree to have her design a building that would actually be built. So Zaha started entering competitions. One contest was for a hotel and sports club in Hong Kong. She painted the whole island with her design nestled right among its mountains. Zaha called it a confetti snowstorm, and her innovation launched her to first place, beating out many prominent architects. But the organizers decided the design was too complicated to build and dropped the project. Though Zaha won, the goalpost had moved. Which reminds me of that quote at the beginning of the book. Zaha wasn't deterred. She kept working, and one day a client from Germany called. Could Zaha design a fire station? Yes. She decided to make the building look like a bird taking flight. People couldn't believe how daring it was and showered Zaha with praise. At last, one of Zaha's designs had become reality. So this fire station, she designed it, and it actually was built. And it looks a lot like this. The fire trucks, I think they come out from right here, under this like floating piece of cement, which comes up in a really sharp point. Success came with even more scrutiny. Scrutiny is a great vocabulary word. It means like people looking closely at what you're doing and analyzing it and looking to see if there was mistakes or if it could potentially work or if it was impossible. Zaha continued to get work, yet critics insisted she was in danger of becoming a paper architect, someone whose designs stay on paper and never get built. Was this really about her designs, or was it because she was different and challenged what was possible? Zaha often didn't agree with this criticism she received, so she had to be tougher than most and confident in her vision. Look at these designs. These are buildings and paintings that she did that are just so different. It was almost like too different from the normal buildings that were built. On to the next challenge. Zaha was hired to create a housing complex in Austria. on a complicated setting with many obstacles that overlapped and intertwined. As Zaha sketched, she remembered the marshes she visited as a child. She pictured the rippling harmony between the man-made structures, the reeds, the water, and the wind. It's like all of this was going right through her pen onto the paper. She's talking on the phone with these fancy bracelets on, interesting clothing. Could she approach this project the same way? Was it possible to create complete harmony in a space so divided? Zaha came up with a daring plan. She made not one building, but a set of 3, split into fragments that weaved the setting together. And if you look really closely at this drawing, there's highways, there's train tracks, there's bridges, there's parks, there's a river, there's people on bicycles, and there's like a little bit of everything going on. And these are the 3 buildings that she designed, she drew. The structures weren't just beautiful, they made everything around them more beautiful too. Zaha's next big goal was to design a project in the United States. She was waiting for the perfect opportunity, and it finally arrived, a competition for an art museum in Ohio. Zaha designed the galleries to look like a stack of concrete boxes floating on air. It was no contest. Zaha's winning proposal made her the first woman to ever design a museum in the United States, and artists were so inspired that they even began to make art specifically for the museum she designed. That's amazing. Zaha was finally building momentum. Clients clamored to hire her. Fellow architects studied her designs, and students dreamed of working in her studio. Zaha would throw her colorful silks and jangling jewelry into a suitcase and take off for France, Singapore, or China. To work on projects, sometimes at a moment's notice. I love the alliteration in here. Clients clamored and jangling jewelry. It's just fun to read. Great writing. All over the world, people stopped to stare at the shapes and structures she had created. She now had hundreds of buildings to her name, and thousands of people lined up to see exhibitions of her work in Vienna and New York. Zaha became the youngest person to win the Pritzker Prize, the highest award an architect can receive. Again, I can't say it enough. Wait until you start seeing some of the photos of buildings that she designed. They're amazing. Look at this. This is only a preview, and this is a painting. Wait until you see the actual thing. No matter where her projects were, Zaha always tried to achieve 2 goals. One was harmony between humans and their surroundings. The other was a sense of change, movement, and never standing still. Was she remembering her adventures in the Sumerian marshes, or the intricate light and shadow play in the mosques and palaces of Baghdad? Zaha smiled. She would never explain why her buildings looked the way they did. They would speak for themselves. And look, this is showing the fame that she's getting. Here she is being interviewed, and there are lots of interviews online. You should check them out. Cameras and microphones everywhere. And here is a note by the author, and selected a timeline. Here it does say on March 31st, 2016 that she died in Florida, United States, which is sad. And this is a bibliography. It tells what texts were used and websites to gather the information that went into making this text, this building, Zaha. Good luck answering the comprehension questions, and come back to this text, watch videos, and check out illustration or images and photographs of some of Zaha's actual designs and buildings.